Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is Sagnick Dutta. I'm an MBBS student at Burdwan Medical College and Hospital, West Bengal. In this video, we'll be talking about the books that I used as a first year medical student, and you can use that as well. Now, talking about any subject in MBBS, there are basically two categories of books. The first being a gold standard book which will actually help you to clarify your concepts and solve your doubts. And the second category of book is an everyday go-to book which you can use for writing your answers, and it actually helps you before your exams preparing for them. So let's get into the topic. Talking about physiology, physiology turns out to be the most comfortable subject for an MBBS student. And the reason for that is pretty simple. The subject is quite relatable to the biology that we have already studied in our class 11th and 12th. And the subject is quite directly written and can be easily understood by reading it once or twice. And that is why most people prefer reading physiology. So they spend most of their time in first year reading physiology. Now, talking about the books that we use in physiology, the first gold standard book that we use is Guyton, this book. Now, this book is pretty simple as compared to other standard books. The language is quite simple, directly written, and can be easily understood, and can be also used as a go-to everyday book for physiology. The next book that we use in physiology, which is also a gold standard book, is Ganong. But we cannot use Ganong as a everyday go-to textbook because it is not even a textbook, it is a review book. But what we can actually use it for is for studying the clinical cases. The clinical cases is very well explained in Ganong. The pathophysiology and the treatments of the clinical cases, the diseases, are very well explained in Ganong, and so we should use Ganong for answering to those type of questions and reading those clinical cases. Now, talking about the everyday go-to book that I personally used was Sembulingam. I personally used this book called as Sembulingam. Now, the thing is, this book is not preferred by many because of its hefty nature, and it's like a simple topic is dealt in multiple sections, and at times some information is very controversial given in this book, and that is why many people do not use this book, but I personally loved this book. Now, talking about an everyday go-to book in West Bengal, which is particularly used here, is The Principles of Physiology by Dr. Devashish Pramanik. That book is also very good enough. It is actually like a combination of excerpts from Guyton as well as Ganong. So it's like a great book in that sense. You can refer to those books in a simplified way by reading the book called The Principles of Physiology by Dr. Devashish Pramanik. So this brings us to the end of the books of physiology. Now let's talk about anatomy. Talking about anatomy, anatomy is divided into different sections like gross anatomy, histology, and embryology. Now, talking about gross anatomy, the gold standard book for gross anatomy is Gray's Anatomy. Now, personally for me, anatomy as a whole was the most dreaded subject for me. So I didn't prefer reading any gold standard book for anatomy because it didn't suit with me well. But if you like anatomy well enough, then you can go for reading the gold standard books like Gray's Anatomy. Now, Gray's Anatomy is a great book for gross anatomy because it has got every detailed explanation of every different part, and it has got some good pictures as well. Now, I had the students version of Gray's Anatomy. This is more like a go-to book. The international edition of Gray's Anatomy is a better one as a standard book. Now, talking about the standard everyday textbook that I used for gross anatomy was B.D. Chaurasia's textbook for anatomy. That comes in about 4 volumes. This is the second volume, which contains the lower limb and abdomen, and it comes with 4 volumes of different sections of the body. and this is more like a combination of notes. Every single thing is written point wise, section wise, so it was very easy for me who didn't like anatomy to read. So this was my go-to textbook for anatomy. Now a substitute for BD Chaurasia is Vishram Singh's textbook for anatomy, which many other students use. That is also very simplified, but the text in Vishram Singh is a lot more concise and simplified than BD Chaurasia as well, so that can be very easily used before the exams. So Vishram Singh is also a very handy textbook before the exams. Now talking about West Bengal in particular, many students and professors prefer studying Dr. A.K. Dutta's anatomy book. Now I cannot call it a everyday go-to textbook, because for me it was like a miniature form of Gray's Anatomy. It contained every single detail, beautifully explained, but still it contained so many information that it couldn't be referred to as a go-to textbook by me at least. But it is preferred by many other students in West Bengal particularly. Now talking about histology section, I used Dr. Inderbir Singh's histology book, and it is this book. This book is very beautiful actually, because it has got some beautiful color atlas in front, which actually helps you identify the slides in the laboratory when you go, and it also has got some point wise description of every other slide that we need to see. So it is a very handy good book for histology. Now coming to embryology, embryology was the most interesting part for me in particular in anatomy. I used Dr. Inderbir Singh's embryology itself, and it is this book. This is very tinier book, but it contains every single information, and the pictures given in this book was very beautiful for me at least. And it is like a go-to book for embryology for every other student pan India, I think. Now talking about neuroanatomy section, many students prefer reading Snell's neuroanatomy. Now that is a very gold standard book for neuroanatomy which many students prefer, but I did my neuroanatomy section from BD Chaurasia itself, so you can do that from there as well, because it is not so badly given in BD Chaurasia. It will work for you for sure. So this brings us to the end of anatomy. Now let us talk about biochemistry. Now talking about biochemistry, this is usually termed as the most boring subject by people in the whole of MBBS. But for me it was a little different. Biochemistry turned out to be the most favorite subject of mine in first year of MBBS. I personally believe any subject whatsoever it might be can be made easily interesting by the professor that you study that subject from. They can make that subject easy and interesting for you. And secondly, the book that you are studying from, maybe you resonate well with that book and that subject becomes interesting for you. Now for me in biochemistry, what actually worked well is the first case. In my first year of MBBS, I had taken the subscription from PrepLadder. The faculty of PrepLadder in biochemistry, Dr. Smiley Power ma'am, was great enough, and that is why actually biochemistry turned out to be one of my favorite subjects in first year of MBBS. She dealt with the topic so precisely in multiple videos, making the concepts very clear and making us remember it as well, that it turned out to be like a great boon for me at least. And secondly, the book that I used was also great enough for me. So now let's get into the topic. Let's talk about the books. Talking about the gold standard book in biochemistry, the two most highly recommended books are Lippincott and Harper. Now I had personally reviewed both the books, but what worked well for me was Lippincott's biochemistry, and it is this book, The Illustrated Reviews of Biochemistry by Lippincott. This book I preferred more than Harper because the language here is easy. It is very directly written in here, and most importantly, the pictures given in Lippincott turned out to be more useful than those given in Harper. So I used Lippincott as the gold standard book for biochemistry, and as a everyday go-to book that I used was the textbook of biochemistry by Dr. Vasudevan. This is also a great book, though it is called a go-to textbook because it's like written by an Indian author, but it actually contains every single information and it's a very detailed book as such. So if you do not like biochemistry as such, if you cannot resonate much with biochemistry like I did not with anatomy, you can use Dr. Pankaj Naik's book of biochemistry as well, because that's a very simplified book which can be readily used before the exams, and that can turn out to be very useful for you as well. So this brings us to the detailed discussions of the books to be used in first year of MBBS. Now if you are competitive enough and you want to solve the questions of for NEET PG or next, then you can use this book, which is termed as a complete review of short subject. This entire book contains both physiology and biochemistry review as well as the previous year questions of the various competitive exams. So this keeps you at par with preparation of your university exams as well as your competitive exam, whether it is next or NEET PG, whatsoever it might be. I loved solving this book particularly, but I didn't solve any MCQ for anatomy as such. I only solved the MCQs given at the end of the chapter in BD Chaurasya for anatomy. But I loved solving this book for physiology and biochemistry. So this is it for today. If you really like the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends. Thank you.